London, 1819. The Ashford Spring Ball was in full swing. Violins sang across the marble floors. Silk gowns swirled like petals in a storm. Crystal glasses clinked with champagne and careful conversation. The cream of society moved through the motions they had perfected since birth. Each step, each smile, each carefully chosen word was part of the dance that mattered far more than the one performed on the ballroom floor. In the corner by the marbled column, where shadows kissed the edge of candlelight, stood Miss Amelia Hartwell, 24 years old. No fortune, no title, no prospects worth mentioning. Her dress was pale blue muslin, simple and proper, remade from last season's fabric with her own hands. Her dark hair was arranged without jewels. Her gloves were clean but mended at the thumb. Everything about her spoke of genteel poverty, that particular kind of respectability that comes with just enough breeding to be invited, but not enough money to matter. She had been standing in that exact spot for 3 hours. Not one gentleman had approached. Not one lady had included her in conversation beyond polite nods. Amelia had become remarkably good at being present yet invisible. It was a skill she had perfected over 7 seasons. 7 years of watching other girls dance, flirt and secure their futures, while she remained fixed to the walls like part of the decoration. "Poor Miss Hartwell," came a voice nearby. Lady Catherine Pembroke, speaking just loud enough to be overheard. 7 seasons and not a single offer. Mother says she's too plain to catch a husband. Wrong family. Wrong fortune. Wrong everything, really. Too clever by half, added Miss Lydia Thornton, adjusting her diamond bracelet. Gentlemen don't want a woman who reads philosophy. They want beauty and breeding. She has neither in sufficient quantity. She's not the type of woman dukes marry. Lady Catherine continued with a laugh. Not even baronets, I'd wager. Perhaps a country vicar might take pity if she's lucky. The words landed like stones in still water. Amelia's expression didn't change. She had learned long ago not to flinch at cruelty disguised as concern. Her fingers tightened slightly on her fan, but otherwise she remained perfectly still. Let them talk, their words could only wound if she gave them permission. Across the ballroom, through the glittering crowd and swirling dancers, someone else had heard those words. Someone who rarely attended such gatherings. Someone whose presence at the Ashford Ball had already set tongues wagging from Mayfair to Cheapside. Julian Blackwood, Duke of Ravenscroft, 32 years old. Impossibly wealthy, impossibly handsome, and impossibly particular about everything from his morning tea to the company he kept. He stood near the musicians' platform, his tall frame commanding attention without effort. His evening coat was perfectly tailored, black superfine. His cravat was tied in a mathematical waterfall that had 3 young bucks, studying it with envy. Everything about him spoke of precision, control and standards, so high that London society had begun to wonder if any woman would ever meet them. For 2 years, every matchmaking mama in England had thrown their daughters at him. Balls, house parties, garden fêtes, theatre boxes. The Duke attended sparingly, and when he did, he watched everything with cool grey eyes that missed nothing and approved of almost nothing. He had danced exactly 4 times in 2 years, each time with a different young lady. Each dance had ended with polite thanks and no further contact. The scandal sheets had taken to calling him the impossible Duke. Women who caught his eye for even a moment became the talk of the season, but none had held his interest beyond a single waltz. Tonight, he had come at the insistence of his grandmother, the Dowager Duchess, who had threatened to disinherit him if he didn't make more effort to secure the family line. He had been at the ball for exactly 47 minutes, had refused 3 introductions, and was calculating how soon he could leave without causing a diplomatic incident with his hostess. Then he heard Lady Catherine's cutting remark about the woman by the column. The woman no one noticed. The woman who was, he observed, the only person in the entire ballroom who wasn't performing. His attention fixed on her immediately. She stood with perfect posture, her head held high despite the insult. She didn't weep or flee or pretend she hadn't heard. She simply existed in that space with a quiet dignity that made everyone else look like actors on a stage. Her face was turned slightly away, but he could see the elegant line of her profile, the intelligence in her dark eyes as they swept the room, observing everything. The Duke's grandmother had told him once that true quality revealed itself not in how people behaved when all eyes were upon them, but in how they carried themselves when they believed no one was watching. This woman, this Miss Hartwell, carried herself like a queen in exile, unnoticed but unbroken. "Your Grace," Lord Ashford appeared at his elbow, sweating slightly from the exertion of hosting 300 guests. "Might I introduce you to Lady Penelope Darlington? Her father is the Earl of—" "Who is the woman by the marble column?" The Duke interrupted, his gaze never leaving Amelia. Lord Ashford followed his line of sight and blinked in surprise. "That's Miss Hartwell, Your Grace, daughter of the late Sir Thomas Hartwell. Respectable enough family, but no fortune to speak of. She's been out for several seasons without any success. I'm afraid she's rather on the shelf." "Introduce me," the Duke said simply. Lord Ashford's mouth opened and closed twice before words emerged. "Your Grace, I'm certain there are more suitable ladies present. Lady Penelope's dowry is substantial, and I didn't ask for your opinion on suitability. I asked for an introduction." The firmness in the Duke's voice allowed no argument. Lord Ashford swallowed hard and began threading through the crowd toward the marble column. The Duke followed, and as he moved through the ballroom, conversations stopped like falling dominoes. Heads turned. Fans fluttered. The impossible Duke was walking with purpose, and everyone wanted to know where. Amelia saw them coming. At first she thought they were heading past her to greet someone more important. Then Lord Ashford stopped directly before her, and her heart began to pound in a way that had nothing to do with the heat of the ballroom. "Miss Hartwell," Lord Ashford said, his voice slightly strangled, "may I present His Grace, the Duke of Ravenscroft, Your Grace, Miss Amelia Hartwell." Amelia sank into a perfect curtsy. Years of deportment lessons had carved the movement into her bones. "Your Grace, I am honored." "Miss Hartwell," the Duke's voice was deep and measured, like dark velvet over stone. "I wonder if you might grant me the honor of the next dance." The ballroom had gone utterly silent. 300 people holding their breath as one. The orchestra faltered mid-note, then recovered hastily. Amelia rose from her curtsy and met his eyes directly. They were grey, she noticed. Storm cloud grey. And they were looking at her, not through her, not past her, but directly at her, as if she were the only person in the room worth seeing. "I am not engaged for the next dance, Your Grace," she said quietly. Her voice was steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "Then you will dance with me," he replied. It wasn't quite a question, but it wasn't quite a command either. Something in between that made her feel, for the first time in 7 years, like her answer actually mattered. She placed her gloved hand in his offered palm. His fingers closed around hers with surprising gentleness, and then, before God and London society and every person who had ever dismissed her as too plain, too poor, too nothing, the impossible Duke led Miss Amelia Hartwell onto the center of the ballroom floor. The orchestra, sensing drama, immediately struck up a waltz, the most intimate of dances, the one that required a gentleman's hand at a lady's waist, and their bodies to move as one. Whispers erupted like wildfire around the room. He chose her? Lady Catherine's voice was shrill with disbelief. This cannot be happening. Someone else muttered. Perhaps it's a mistake, offered another. But it was no mistake. The Duke's hand settled at Amelia's waist with perfect propriety. His other hand held hers firmly, and as the music swelled, he swept her into the waltz with a grace that made breathing difficult. "You dance beautifully, Miss Hartwell," he observed after the first turn. "I've had considerable time to practice. Your Grace." The words came out before Amelia could stop them. Too honest, too revealing. "Forgive me." "That was true?" he interrupted, and there was something that might have been amusement in his eyes. "I appreciate truth, Miss Hartwell. It's remarkably rare in ballrooms." They moved through another turn. Amelia was acutely aware of every place their bodies nearly touched. The warmth of his hand through her dress, the subtle scent of sandalwood and something darker, every eye in the room trained on them like cannons. "May I ask why you chose to dance with me?" The question escaped before Amelia could consider the wisdom of asking. "Because you were the only genuine person in this room," the Duke replied without hesitation. "Everyone else is performing. You were simply being." Amelia's breath caught. "I'm not certain that's a compliment to your Grace. Perhaps I'm simply poor at performing. Or perhaps you're wise enough not to waste effort on an audience unworthy of the performance." His grey eyes held hers. "Tell me, Miss Hartwell, what do you think of all this?" He tilted his head slightly, indicating the ballroom, the gawking crowd, the entire glittering spectacle around them. "Honestly?" she asked. "I've already established that I prefer honesty." Amelia took a breath. 7 years of biting her tongue. 7 years of polite nothings and careful silence. Something in his steady gaze made her want to speak truth. For once. "I think most people here are terrified. They smile and dance and say exactly the right things. But underneath, they're all desperately afraid of being found wanting. So they perform perfection until they've forgotten who they actually are." The Duke studied her face as they turned. "And you?" "I was found wanting years ago, Your Grace. There's a strange freedom in that. I no longer have to pretend." Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but a softening around his eyes that made him look younger, less like marble carved into ducal form, and more like a man who had just heard something unexpected and valuable. "You were not found wanting, Miss Hartwell. You were simply not recognized. There is a considerable difference." The waltz was ending too soon. Amelia felt the music winding down and knew that when it stopped, this strange, beautiful moment would end. She would return to her column. He would return to being impossible, and London would dissect this dance for weeks before moving on to the next scandal. But the Duke did not release her hand when the music stopped. Instead, he did something that made the entire ballroom gasp collectively. He bowed over her hand, and then, still holding it, he turned to face the assembled crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice carried across the sudden silence, clear, commanding, allowing no interruption. "I find myself in need of making an announcement." Amelia's heart stopped. What was he doing? "For 2 years, I have attended London's finest entertainments in search of something I could not name. I have met accomplished young ladies, beautiful young ladies, well-bred young ladies, with impeccable connections and impressive dowries." He paused, his thumb brushing once across Amelia's gloved knuckles. "None of them possessed what I was actually seeking. You could have heard a pin drop in Grosvenor Square. Tonight, I have found it." The Duke's gaze moved across the sea of shocked faces. "Miss Amelia Hartwell has agreed to dance with me, and now, if she permits, I should very much like to court her properly, with intention, with the full knowledge that I am seeking a wife, and I have found in her qualities that no dowry can purchase and no title can manufacture. Amelia's vision swam. This wasn't possible. Dukes didn't court women like her. They certainly didn't announce such intentions in the middle of a ball before 300 witnesses. "Your Grace," she whispered, "you cannot mean this. You don't even know me." "I know enough," he replied, just as quietly. "I know that you stood with dignity while others mocked you. I know that you speak truth when lies would be easier. I know that you are the only person in this room who has treated this moment as real, rather than theatrical." His voice dropped lower. "If you tell me you have no interest in being courted, I will escort you back to your corner and trouble you no further. But if there is even the smallest possibility that you might wish to know me better, then I ask you to permit me the honor of calling upon you tomorrow." Amelia looked into his storm-grey eyes. She thought of her 7 years against the wall, 7 years of being invisible, 7 years of hearing that she wasn't the type of woman dukes married, and she thought about the warm steadiness of his hand, still holding hers, the way he had seen her when no one else had. But the impossible possibility that maybe, just maybe, this was real. "You may call tomorrow, Your Grace," she said softly. "I will be home at 3. The Duke's face transformed. That almost smile became a real one, and it was devastating. 3 o'clock. Then, I shall count the hours. He escorted her back to her column, bowed formally over her hand once more, and then departed the ballroom with the same measured precision he had entered it, leaving behind a silence so complete that it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Then, all at once, chaos erupted. Ladies shrieked, gentlemen argued, Lord Ashford looked like he might faint. And Amelia stood once more by her marble column, but this time she was the center of attention rather than its decoration. Lady Catherine pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with confusion and envy. What did you, this makes no sense. Perhaps sense is overrated, Amelia heard herself say. The strangest calm had settled over her. Perhaps sometimes the impossible simply decides to become possible. That night, Amelia returned to the small townhouse she shared with her widowed mother and younger sister. Her mother was awake, waiting in the sitting room despite the late hour. "How was the ball, dear?" Mrs. Hartwell asked, looking up from her needlework. Amelia removed her gloves slowly, considering how to answer. "Mother," she said finally, "I believe something extraordinary just happened." She told the whole story. The insult, the Duke's approach, the dance, the announcement. Her mother's hands stilled on her needlework, her face moving through shock, disbelief, and finally, careful hope. "Amelia," her mother said when the story was complete, "do you understand what this means? If the Duke truly intends to court you—" "I don't believe it's real," Amelia interrupted, sinking into the worn sofa. "I think tomorrow will come, and he will remember that I'm nobody, the daughter of a knight with no fortune and no connections. He'll realize his mistake and send a polite note explaining that he was feeling unwell or that he spoke in haste. Or," her mother said gently, "perhaps he sees what I have always seen, a daughter of remarkable character, intelligence and dignity. Perhaps he values those things more than a dowry." Amelia wanted to believe it. But 7 years had taught her that fairy tales didn't happen to girls like her. At precisely 3 o'clock the next afternoon, a knock sounded at their door. Amelia's heart lurched. She had spent the morning telling herself he wouldn't come, the afternoon convincing herself it didn't matter if he did, and the last hour pacing the sitting room like a caged bird. Their maid, Betsy, opened the door. There was a pause. Then Betsy's voice, higher than normal. "His Grace, the Duke of Ravenscroft, to see Miss Hartwell." Amelia's mother made a small sound. Amelia found she couldn't breathe. He had come. The impossible Duke had actually come. He entered their modest sitting room and somehow made it feel smaller and larger at the same time. He was dressed in afternoon clothes of dark blue superfine, carrying a small wrapped package and a bouquet of white roses. Simple, elegant, and clearly chosen with care. "Miss Hartwell," he bowed. "Mrs. Hartwell, thank you for receiving me." Her mother had recovered her composure with remarkable speed. "Your Grace, you honor our home. Please, do sit down. I'll have tea brought." "Thank you, but I wonder if I might impose upon your kindness further." The Duke's eyes moved to Amelia. "The weather is remarkably fine. Would you permit me to take Miss Hartwell for a walk in the park, with your companion naturally? I believe fresh air and conversation might benefit us both." It was perfectly proper. It was also perfectly clear. He wanted to speak with Amelia somewhere less formal than a sitting room under a mother's watchful eye. 20 minutes later, Amelia found herself walking through Hyde Park with the Duke of Ravenscroft at her side and Betsy trailing at a discreet distance behind them. The spring afternoon was perfect. Flowers bloomed, birds sang. Other couples strolled the paths, but Amelia barely saw them. All her attention was focused on the man beside her. "I brought you something," the Duke said, offering her the wrapped package. "It's presumptuous, perhaps, but I wanted you to have it." Amelia unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a book, not a novel or a book of poetry, which would have been the conventional choice. It was a collection of philosophical essays by Mary Wollstonecraft, controversial, intellectual, exactly the sort of thing no gentleman was supposed to give a lady. "Lady Catherine mentioned that you read philosophy," the Duke said quietly. "She meant it as an insult." "I took it as useful intelligence." Amelia's fingers traced the leather binding. "Your Grace, this is—" "If you call me Your Grace one more time in that formal tone, I may have to insist you call me Julian." He interrupted. "At least when we're not in public. That would be highly improper." "Yes," he agreed. "It would. Do it anyway." Something warm and dangerous bloomed in Amelia's chest. "Very well. Julian." His name felt strange on her tongue, like stealing something precious. "This book is deeply thoughtful, thank you." They walked in silence for a moment. The path took them past the Serpentine, where sunlight danced on water like scattered diamonds. "I should explain myself," Julian said finally. "Last night was dramatic, intentionally so. But I realize you have no reason to trust my motives or believe my sincerity." "You're right," Amelia replied. "I don't." He glanced at her, surprised by her directness. Then he smiled, that devastating smile. "I'm beginning to understand why I like you. You don't know me well enough to like me. Then allow me to know you better." He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Miss Hartwell." "Amelia, if I may, I meant every word I said last night. I am not given to impulse or drama for its own sake. I have spent 2 years searching London for something real, something genuine. I found it in you, in the way you stood with dignity while others scorned you, in the honesty of your observations, in the way you dance as if you actually feel the music rather than simply performing the steps. You learned all that from one dance." Amelia's voice was skeptical despite the hope rising in her throat. "I learned enough to know I want more dances, more conversations, more of whatever this is." He gestured between them. "I'm not asking you to marry me today. I'm asking you to let me court you properly, to give me the opportunity to prove that I see you, to show you that what you think is your inadequacy is actually your greatest strength." Amelia studied his face, the sharp lines of his jaw, the intensity in his grey eyes, the absolute certainty in his expression. "Why me?" she asked. "Truly, you could have anyone." "That's precisely the problem. I could have anyone willing to perform the role of Duchess. What I cannot have, apparently anywhere in London except standing by a marble column last night, is someone who is simply themselves, someone who doesn't need my title or my fortune to make them whole, someone who has already learned to stand strong on their own." He paused. "I don't want a woman who needs to be rescued, Amelia. I want a partner, someone who chooses me for reasons that have nothing to do with what I can provide, and everything to do with who we might become together." The words hit Amelia like sunlight after 7 years of shadow. She thought of all the young ladies at the ball last night, all their performances, all their practiced smiles and rehearsed conversation, and she thought about herself, standing in her corner, having given up pretense long ago because she had nothing left to prove. "I'm not accomplished," she said quietly. "I can barely play the pianoforte. I don't sing well. My needlework is adequate, but uninspired. I have no great beauty or charm." "You're honest," Julian countered. "You're intelligent. You see through pretense to truth. You've endured rejection with dignity, and when you dance, you move like you mean it." His voice dropped lower. "Those are the accomplishments that matter, Amelia. At least to me. London will never accept this," she warned. "They'll say you've gone mad, that I've bewitched you somehow, that it can't possibly last. London can say whatever it wishes. I stopped concerning myself with London's opinions 2 years ago." He offered his arm again. "Shall we continue walking? I'd like to hear about your favorite philosophy and whether you think Wollstonecraft goes far enough in her arguments." They walked and talked for 2 hours, about books and ideas, and the absurdities of social convention. Amelia found herself laughing more than she had in years. Julian was wickedly funny when he chose to be, his observations about London society sharp enough to draw blood, but he was also thoughtful and surprisingly vulnerable when he spoke about his own loneliness, his frustration with the shallowness of his world, his desperate search for something real. When he finally escorted her home, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. At her doorstep he bowed over her hand. "May I call again tomorrow?" "Yes," Amelia heard herself say. "Please do." His thumb brushed across her knuckles through her glove. "Until tomorrow, then." That evening, after he had gone, Amelia's younger sister Emma burst into her room without knocking. At 16, Emma was everything Amelia was not: pretty, vivacious, full of romantic dreams. She threw herself onto Amelia's bed dramatically. "Tell me everything," she demanded. "The whole neighborhood is talking about nothing else. The Duke of Ravenscroft courting you. It's like something from a novel." Amelia sat at her small writing desk, still holding the book Julian had given her. "It doesn't feel real." "It is real," Emma insisted. "He came here. He walked with you for hours. He's calling again tomorrow. Amelia, don't you see? This is your chance. Our chance. If you marry a duke—" "Emma, stop." Amelia turned to face her sister. "I'm not counting on anything. This could end tomorrow. He could realize his mistake. Or," Emma said, her eyes shining, "he could realize you're exactly what he's been searching for. Why can't you believe that?" "Because I've spent 7 years learning not to hope." The words came out more bitter than Amelia intended. 7 years watching other girls get everything I wanted. 7 years being told I'm too plain, too poor, too wrong. Forgive me if I'm not ready to believe in fairy tales just because a duke asked me to dance. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she crossed to Amelia and took her hands. "I watched you yesterday before you left for the ball. You looked so sad, like you'd given up. But when you came home last night, there was light in your eyes again. Don't give that up, Amelia. Don't protect yourself so carefully that you miss out on something real. Amelia squeezed her sister's hands. What if I let myself believe, and then it ends? What if hoping hurts more than never having hoped at all? What if it doesn't end? Emma whispered. What if this is the beginning of everything? Julian called every day for the next 2 weeks. Always at 3. Always proper, but pushing the boundaries of propriety just enough to make their time together feel dangerous and alive. They walked in the park. They attended the theatre, sitting in his private box while London whispered and stared. They had tea at Gunter's, where he introduced her to ices and conversation that ranged from politics to poetry. Amelia learned that Julian had become Duke at 18, when his father died suddenly, that he had spent the last 14 years managing vast estates and even vaster responsibilities, that he was lonely in ways that had nothing to do with being alone, that beneath his impossible standards and cool demeanor was a man desperate for connection, but terrified of settling for anything less than genuine. I watched my parents' marriage, he told her one afternoon as they sat in the park. Betsy was off feeding ducks, giving them a rare moment of privacy. They were perfectly matched according to society. Same breeding, same connections, same complete indifference to each other. They lived in the same house but separate worlds. When my father died, my mother didn't weep. She simply moved to the dower house and continued her life as if nothing had changed. Is that what frightens you? Amelia asked gently. Ending up like them? I'm terrified of it, he admitted. I watched them perform affection for society while feeling nothing for each other. I swore I would rather die alone than live that lie. His grey eyes found hers. Then I met you, and for the first time, I thought perhaps loneliness and performance aren't the only options. What if I disappoint you? Amelia's voice was small. What if the reality of me, day after day, isn't as interesting as the idea of me? Julian reached across the small space between them and took her hand. It was improper. Betsy was too far away to serve as proper chaperone. Amelia should have pulled back. Instead, she let his fingers intertwine with hers. You could never disappoint me, he said quietly. Do you know why? Because you're not trying to be anything other than yourself. Every other woman I've met has been performing the role of perfect at chess. You're just being Amelia. That's all I want. That's all I've ever wanted. London's opinion shifted slowly, then all at once. At first, the scandal sheets were vicious. The impossible Duke's impossible choice, read one headline. Has Ravenscroft lost his mind? Demanded another. Lady Catherine Pembroke gave interviews to anyone who would listen, insisting that Amelia must have bewitched the Duke through some nefarious means. But then something unexpected happened. The Dowager Duchess of Ravenscroft, Julian's formidable grandmother, invited Amelia to tea. Alone, without Julian present, Amelia arrived at the grand Ravenscroft townhouse with her heart in her throat, certain she was about to be told that this courtship could never result in marriage. The Dowager was 80 if she was a day, with white hair piled high and eyes exactly like Julian's. She studied Amelia over the tea service for a full minute before speaking. I'm going to be direct, Miss Hartwell. I don't believe in wasting time at my age. My grandson has been courting you for 3 weeks. The entire city is in an uproar. Half of society thinks he's gone mad. The other half is taking bets on how long until he comes to his senses. She poured tea with steady hands. What I want to know is, are you in love with him? Amelia's throat went dry. Your Grace. No lies, no pretty deflections, just truth. The old woman's gaze was piercing. Do you love my grandson? Yes, Amelia heard herself say. I didn't mean to. I tried not to. But yes, I love him. The dowager's face softened slightly. And do you love him for himself, or for what he can provide? I love him because he sees me, Amelia replied quietly, because he asks me questions and actually listens to my answers, because he makes me laugh, because underneath all that impossible perfection, he's just a man trying to find something real in a world of performance. And because when I'm with him, I feel like myself for the first time in my life. The dowager set down her teacup with a decisive clink. Good. That's precisely what I needed to hear. Julian has been impossible since the day he was born. Brilliant, but impossible. I've watched him reject every suitable young lady in England, and I began to think he would never find anyone. Then he came to me 3 weeks ago and told me he'd met you. Do you know what he said? Amelia shook her head, unable to speak. He said you were the first person who didn't make him feel alone in a crowded room, that you understood what it meant to be judged for things outside your control, that you were kind without being weak and strong without being hard. The old woman's eyes were suspiciously bright. He said you were his equal, Miss Hartwell, not in fortune or breeding, but in the things that actually matter. I'm afraid I'll fail him, Amelia whispered. I don't know how to be a duchess. I don't know the first thing about managing great houses or hosting important people or any of it. Neither did I when I married the last Duke of Ravenscroft, the dowager said briskly. I was the daughter of a country squire, no fortune, no connections, just a girl who caught a duke's eye because I made him laugh. We were married for 53 years, Miss Hartwell, the best 53 years of my life. She reached across and patted Amelia's hand. You'll learn. And more importantly, you'll have Julian beside you, equally uncertain about whether love is enough. That shared uncertainty is what makes a partnership real. When Amelia left the dowager's townhouse an hour later, she found Julian waiting in the entrance hall. He looked anxious, a rare crack in his usual composed demeanor. Well, he asked, did my grandmother terrify you into reconsidering? On the contrary, Amelia replied, and she couldn't stop the smile spreading across her face. I think she just gave me her blessing. Julian's entire face transformed. Without thinking, without caring that 3 footmen were watching, he pulled Amelia into his arms. It was brief. It was proper. It was absolutely improper. And it was perfect. Marry me, he whispered against her hair. I know it's too soon. I know you might need more time. But Amelia, I am desperately, completely certain. Marry me. Amelia pulled back, just enough to see his face. His grey eyes were bright with something that looked like fear and hope tangled together. The impossible Duke, vulnerable before her. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll marry you. The announcement appeared in the Morning Post the next day. His Grace, the Duke of Ravenscroft, is pleased to announce his engagement to Miss Amelia Hartwell. The wedding will take place at St. George's, Hanover Square, in 1 month's time. London exploded. The scandal sheets couldn't decide whether to be outraged or enchanted. Lady Catherine Pembroke claimed a headache and retired to the country. The betting books at White's recorded losses in the thousands, as gentlemen who had wagered against the match paid up to those who had believed. And through it all, Amelia and Julian began planning a life together. Not the life London expected, but the one they both wanted. Real, genuine, honest. The wedding day arrived, sunny and perfect. St. George's was packed with London's finest. The old families who had known Julian since birth. The ambitious families hoping to gain favour. The curious families who simply wanted to witness the impossible become real. Amelia walked down the aisle in a gown of ivory silk, simple and elegant, with white roses in her hair. She saw Julian waiting at the altar, and all the fear, all the doubt, all the 7 years of being invisible fell away. Because he was looking at her like she was the only person in the world, like she was precious, like she was exactly enough. The vows were traditional, their voices were steady, and when the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Julian kissed her with a tenderness that made several ladies in the pews reach for their handkerchiefs. The wedding breakfast was held at Ravenscroft House. 300 guests, music, dancing, all the performance of society playing out exactly as expected. But Amelia barely noticed any of it. She was too busy watching Julian move through the crowd, accepting congratulations and seeking her eyes across the room every few minutes as if reassuring himself that she was real. As the sun began to set, Julian found her on the terrace, taking a breath of fresh air away from the crush of guests. "Hiding?" he asked, joining her at the balustrade. "Breathing," she corrected. "There are a lot of people in there. We could leave," Julian said suddenly. "Right now. Skip the rest of the reception, go to the country house, start our actual life together without all these people watching." Amelia turned to face him fully. "Are you serious?" "Completely. I married you, Amelia, not them. And I find I'm desperately eager to begin the part where it's just us." "What will people say?" Julian's smile was wicked. "That the impossible Duke did something impossible again. That you bewitched me thoroughly. That we're scandalous and improper." He pulled her closer. "I don't care. Do you?" Amelia thought about the girl she had been 7 seasons ago, desperate for approval, terrified of judgment, performing propriety while dying inside, and she thought about the woman she was now, loved, chosen, free. "No," she said, laughing. "I don't care at all. Let's go." They slipped away from their own wedding reception like thieves. Julian's carriage was ready. His staff had been warned. Within 20 minutes, they were racing through London toward the countryside, leaving behind society's expectations and London's gossip and all of it. Inside the carriage, Julian pulled Amelia close. "I love you," he said. Simple, direct, true. "I loved you from the moment I saw you standing by that marble column, refusing to perform for people unworthy of the show." "I love you," Amelia replied, "even though you stopped an entire ball just to dance with me. Even though you announced your intentions in front of 300 people. Even though you're absolutely impossible." "Especially because I'm impossible," he corrected, and kissed her thoroughly. They arrived at Ravenscroft Hall after midnight. The country estate was smaller than the London townhouse, but infinitely more beautiful. Ancient stone, ivy-covered walls, gardens that stretched into darkness. The staff had prepared the Duchess's chambers for Amelia, but she barely saw them that first night. She and Julian stood in the portrait gallery, looking at the paintings of all the duchesses who had come before. Women with elaborate gowns and proud faces. Women who looked like they belonged in gilded frames. "I don't look like them," Amelia said quietly. "I'll never be what people expect a duchess to look like." Julian studied the portraits, then looked at her. "Good. I don't want you to look like them. I want you to look like you. I want you to change what people expect a duchess to be." He took her hand. "You're going to redefine this role, Amelia, not through performance or perfection, but through being absolutely yourself. And someday, future duchesses will look at your portrait and think, that's what a duchess should be. That's what real looks like." Amelia's eyes filled with tears, happy tears. For the first time in her life, she felt seen. Not for what she lacked or what she should be, but for exactly who she was. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For dancing with me. For stopping the entire ball. for being impossible enough to see me when no one else did. Julian pulled her close. Thank you for staying by that column, for not fleeing when everyone else performed, for being brave enough to be real. He kissed her forehead. You saved me, Amelia, from a life of loneliness disguised as perfection. We saved each other, she corrected. And in the portrait gallery of Ravenscroft Hall, surrounded by generations of perfection, the impossible Duke and the woman they said he'd never marry began their life together. Real, genuine, honest, impossible, exactly as it should be. If this story moved your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Share which moment touched you most deeply in the comments below. Your thoughts and feelings matter here. This is a community built on honesty and connection, just like Amelia and Julian's love. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of love that defies expectations, dignity that withstands judgment, and hearts that find each other across impossible odds. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a tale of redemption, recognition, and real love. And if you know someone who needs to hear that they are enough exactly as they are, share this story. Sometimes we all need reminding that the right person will see us, truly see us, even when the whole world looks away. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in stories that heal. Until our next journey through the ballrooms and hearts of Victorian England, remember this: you are not too anything to be loved. You are exactly right for someone who values truth over performance. Stay until the end for another heartwarming Victorian romance that will appear on your screen automatically. The journey continues.